Hello, and welcome to At the Forefront Fintech Conversations. I'm Sam Belden, AVP and Head of Content at Forefront, and today I'm joined by the co-CEOs of VersiFi, a digital asset trading and lending firm. Samir Shalaby is VersiFi's founder and president, while Martin Garcia, who joined the firm this past fall, oversees sales and trading functions. Gentlemen, welcome to At the Forefront.
Thank you, Sam.
So Samir and Martin are joining us today on the heels of a successful Series A funding round announced in November. And so today we're going to be discussing a little bit about what VersiFi is bringing to market, how Samir and Martin's unique experiences in both TradFi and digital assets have influenced their approach here, and also their perspective on the evolving crypto regulatory landscape. And stay tuned until the end. We're going to be discussing a couple of predictions for 2024 as well. So it should be a great discussion, but let's start at the beginning. Samir, it's obviously an exciting time for VersiFi. So tell us what you're building and why this is the right time for you to come to market.
Yeah, thanks again, Sam, for having us. This is great to be joined by Martin and have this discussion. Like you said, it's a really exciting time for VersiFi. We see a lot of opportunity in the marketplace, especially post the crypto winter that the industry kind of faced in the last year or so. A lot of opportunities here. There's a lot of interest in the marketplace around trading and lending capabilities offered in a robust TradFi-like institutional model. And we're very excited to be putting together this platform and the capabilities to support institutional clients. Our focus around trading and lending is going to be coupled with two key components, if you will. One is a high-tech, robust technology capability alongside with a high-touch service model. That's really critical to support these types of clients in this exciting new market opportunity. And as we've talked to institutional TradFi type hedge fund managers, institutional investors, and so on, we have seen consistent messaging and consistent kind of interest from all of them that the need for trading and lending capabilities around crypto derivatives and spot is something that they're very interested in. They'd like to start investing at scale in the industry, but they'd like to see counterparties that are robust, that are operating in a model that's consistent with how they've operated for the last 20, 30, 50 years. So we're very excited about that. And we're very excited to also have as our anchor investor, you mentioned our Series A, Hunting Hill Global Capital came in and invested and led our Series A round, which is great. They're obviously a TradFi fund that has had crypto exposure in the last few years. So they are intimately familiar with the market. They understand it. They can certainly guide us in our journey. But also they are, as a TradFi fund, they want to see that robust market structure. They want to see a strong, viable counterparty that is able to support them. And we're elated to just have them as our key anchor investor and partner here as we're building out this business.
Fantastic. Thanks for that overview, Samir. And Martin, turning to you now. You're sort of the newcomer to VersiFi, but not to the digital asset space, having headed up trading and lending at Genesis, and in addition to having a long career in the TradFi space. So tell us what led you to join VersiFi and what you see as the opportunity here.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And you kind of hit the nail on the head that, very excited to be joining Samir, obviously in my last role at Genesis, which is a wholly owned sub of Digital Currency Group. It was really a fantastic seat for the time that I was there, from its inception and really before, in the early days of crypto trading, until I left in the summer of 2021. So in that seat, was really able to be at the front of a lot of these different conversations with institutions as they began their exploration into digital assets, and was just so fortunate for that experience to be, part of the DCG umbrella where you have Grayscale, an asset manager, Genesis that was doing trading and lending, a mining company and Foundry, and a news media company in CoinDesk. In addition to DCG's venture portfolio, you really had such an interesting look at the space in general, and really allowed me to see the space from a unique view that not a lot of people were able to enjoy. So obviously, after my departure from Genesis, I took some time off and began kind of speaking to Adam Gurin at Hunting Hill, who was a client and became a friend, and he had introduced me to Samir. And over the next year or so, got to know Samir a little bit better, got to understand the way that he thinks and he operates. And one of the biggest issues that I felt that I wasn't able to do a good enough job at Genesis was on the technology front. We had a lot of great people, a lot of great positioning in the market, and just didn't have the tech to service the clients as well as we maybe had wanted to. So being able to partner with someone like Samir that brings this depth and breadth of knowledge is just really special. And I feel like the timing was really fortuitous for us, right? You've got this washout of a lot of the different companies in the space, my predecessor firm included, and really presented a really unique opportunity where you're seeing some rapid changes in the space. And a lot of the signals that we saw that meant that we felt institutional adoption was going to take another move forward and continue on this path to really more widespread institutional adoption in general. So really it was the way that Samir thinks about things and his what he brings to the table from kind of the technological standpoint that made a lot of sense for me. And he's built and sold successful businesses in the past that I felt made him just a really, really amazing partner. And I'm not naive to the amount of work that it will be to build a company like this, and being able to work with somebody that you enjoy being around, that has a lot of energy, that demands a lot from the people that he works with, is something that I also identify with. And I'm just very excited to be working alongside him.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I can really feel the excitement from both of you about what you're building. So that is always great to see on the At the Forefront podcast, but for the crypto space in general. So that's great. Talking about the broader crypto landscape, Samir, one of the reasons I think most people agree institutions have hesitated to get into crypto is because of that lack of regulatory clarity. And I imagine that that reality sort of has an impact on how a provider like VersiFi thinks about its business, its strategy. So tell me about how you are accounting for the evolving regulatory landscape in how you guys are building your business.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, this is definitely the biggest challenge, I think, for the overall industry is the regulatory landscape and how do we manage it and so on. And as we were looking and as we were kind of planning, the roadmap and establishing the vision of VersiFi and so on, spent a lot of time talking to a lot of the institutional investors and kind of getting their thoughts and feedback. And then they were looking for a few things. One was, the counterparties that are robust, that are operating, in an institutional-like model, and that was obviously something we can control and manage. The other was the overall market structure and how different participants can kind of work together to satisfy the overall kind of need for the market, and that's something, again, I believe is now happening given the crypto winter of last year. I think there's a transformation that's going on now in the industry, and all the different participants are starting to focus on particular functions, and they're all starting to work together on that. which is all great because we want to be collaborative to build the total solution, if you will, for our collective clients. But then the third component is the regulatory oversight. And we at VersiFi are building with a kind of a regulatory mindset in, as we're establishing all of our processes, procedures, technology, footprint, etc. We know regulation is coming. We are building for this regulation. We're not shying away from regulation. We know that it's coming. We're embracing it, if you will. And we are building everything with an eye towards regulation. And frankly, it's good to see that the market now is starting to evolve and transform itself a bit, because that's going to make it easier for the regulators to come in and regulate. When they see a market structure that looks and behaves like TradFi, that's going to make it a bit easier for them to start regulating and defining kind of the boundaries and so on, to make this work in a more robust fashion that would support their institutions. So for example, one of the things that we've already seen the market changing and evolving around is exchanges that had been trying to offer exchange as well as custody all wrapped up, along other capabilities like market making, lending, etc. We're starting to see the exchanges now starting to break up exchange activity from custody activity, and they're starting to partner with custodians. And that's a very big positive for the industry, because that certainly was conflicted and it did not resemble what we had seen in TradFi. Obviously New York Stock Exchange doesn't custody anything, as an example. So seeing that change, that's a good thing. And frankly, that's in line with some of the comments that the SEC had given out, a year or so ago, that custody and exchange activity should be segregated. So it's good to see market participants in the market kind of evolve to make it easier for the regulators to regulate. And certainly at VersiFi, we're building everything and we're doing everything with an eye towards regulations and with what we think is going to be the end market structure. And we're trying to make sure that everything we do is consistent with that end market structure, which frankly is going to look like TradFi. That's our belief. So we're embracing all this. We're building with all this in mind. And when the regulation is established and fully kind of clear to everyone, we feel that we'll be kind of, we're not going to change anything. It's going to be built for that. And we're hopefully kind of beneficiaries of the regulatory framework that would be established at some point.
Great. Thanks for that explanation. You brought up a couple of examples of market evolution there, and with 2024 nearly upon us, it makes sense to think about the market as a whole, think about how it may or may not evolve in the year ahead and beyond. So Martin, with that, give us a sense. What's one prediction that you have for the digital asset landscape as we head into 2024 and look beyond?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So I think that the main prediction for 2024 for me is that we will see an ETF approved. Obviously early next year is my belief. But taking it a step further, I believe that approval will drive institutional adoption, and not only drive institutional adoption, but it will then push the regulatory bodies and the governing bodies out there to create more guidelines from a regulatory standpoint. So I think that the ETF approval will drive institutional adoption, which will then push those institutions even further to push the regulators to have more clear guidelines for us. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that a lot of the institutions that we talk to, because there's no clear guideline, because we're seeing a lot of this regulation by enforcement, they are more hesitant than maybe they were, in the bull run that we saw in 2021 and prior. So I'm confident that we'll see this ETF approved, that then we will see, the institutions pushing regulators and regulators pushing, because they want to see, they want to put protections in place for investors and have this look more like, other asset classes that they have seen in the past. So not going to go so far as to say that certain prominent finance CEOs will reverse their course entirely in 2024. But I do think that you will see that happen once we get some more of the regulatory clarity, which I think we might just miss in 2024. But I think in the next 18, 24 months, I think is when we'll start to see, some real updates from the regulators that are out there.
That's great. No,
in general, we think it's going to be an exciting time. 2024 is going to be a real exciting year. So we're looking forward to that. Very exciting.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, you guys touched on a couple of ways that it feels like we're really at an important inflection point in crypto right now. And the fact that you guys are building your business towards that future state is really fantastic to hear you guys describe it in detail. So appreciate your time today. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this great discussion of what VersiFi is building and how they see the crypto landscape at large. So if you'd like to learn more about what VersiFi is up to, you can check them out at versifi.io. That's VersiFi.io. Or you can head over to Forefront Communications website, forefrontcoms.com. That's comms with 2 M's to hear more discussions like this. So again, thank you to all who tuned in, and thank you, Samir and Martin, for your time today. Until next time.